What's your advice for founders today, or just like people building, operators, people in the business space in general, in order to like create that community? Are there things that you advise people do, or ways that they should go about it that's not, because I feel like a lot of people, especially our age, feel like networking is like icky or like not like the vibe that they want to create like true connections in, or those sorts of things. So what's your advice to like young people today that want to start fostering those communities?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And I think I think about myself. So I did not realize that Twitter was such a huge deal in VC land until I started at Republic, and everyone was like, you have to get on Twitter. So I started from scratch. I had like no followers on LinkedIn either. Didn't have like a newsletter. And now 5 years later, I have 14,000 on Twitter, 17,000 on LinkedIn, and my newsletter has 70,000 subscribers. But that, like, again, 5 years ago, it was nothing. And I think the biggest action and kind of step I tell everyone to take, it goes into two things. I think the first category is you do have to just kind of get over like the cringe of it all.
Yeah.
I like to call this like the cringe epidemic, where people are just so afraid to look like they're trying that they just don't try at all. And you just hold yourself back that way. Like it's like the classic saying, it's going to be cringe until it's not, and everyone is asking you how you did it. And so I feel like putting yourself out there, just trying to get over the idea of being perceived. My favorite hack for that is literally just schedule all your posts. I do not tweet or post on LinkedIn Live. I just get it scheduled. It goes out. I don't have to think about it.
Turn the other way.
Yeah. I'm like, I'm not going to worry about this right now. And that honestly helped like a ton. And then the other side of it is, I think, to your point about like networking being icky, I think it's because the connotation with networking is like, here's a transaction. Like,
totally.
I pass you something, you pass me something. I've always been a very like community like minded person, in the sense that like I'm a Pisces, so I'm very like, I just want to give, and that's like my biggest thing. And I truly think that being like a giving, kind person and leading with that, eventually when you need something, you then have kind of like the relationship to help out with it. But again, like even if you give and you don't get anything in return, I think giving is so important. And there's been so much restraint in a way of people wanting to like keep doors closed, not make space for others. And I try to lead with the opposite of that. And I'd say in the last 5 years, that mentality has helped me more than anything else that I've done in this space. It's really just lifting others up with me, giving as much as I can. And now that I'm founding a company, I've like come back like, hey, like I finally have something to ask you for, after like 5 years of having the relationship. So yeah, that's how I think about it.
But it does take time, and I feel like that is something that's so critical to understand, is like you might not, and in fact like probably shouldn't get something out of it right now, but like there are so many things that then that relationship can foster in the future, or support with, or whatever that is. I want to talk about your newsletter a bit. You started that a couple years ago, the Z List, and it has become like such a community place for things in VC, for things in business, like just such a well-rounded kind of like hub of information, support, all those sorts of things. What was the inspiration behind it? Why did you start it in the first place?
Honestly, I started it out of kind of going back to like when I was an undergrad. I, again, had met so many founders, and there were founders that had raised 200 million, founders who had raised nothing. And I think for me, my frustration was like, I still have no idea why VC is such a fragmented industry, in the sense that like the founders, it's almost like they have to like claw to even get like a VC on the phone. And then now that I know VCs, I realize that they're just constantly parsing through everything and constantly searching for a company that they believe in or resonate with. And so when I started the Z List, it really just started as like a tiny Gmail. It wasn't even a newsletter. It was like an email that went out to 20 people. And it was like, okay, here are the 15 VCs that I've met through just like going up to them when they were speaking on campus at Columbia, or just like messaging them on LinkedIn, and just sending them a list of the companies I was seeing in the wild, but then the founders I'd met and the founders I'd worked with. And that slowly started snowballing, because the VCs would of course like request introductions to the founders. And then I remember I got like my first email from a founder that said, this person you introduced me to invested $75,000. And I was like, okay, there's something here in the whole like notion of giving and creating a community. And so the Z List, like very selfishly, the Z is for myself. Everyone's like, oh, it's Gen Z. And I'm like, no, it's for Zehra. And I basically at a certain point realized, okay, I have a couple hundred people on this. I think I need a software to do it. And I'm a Substack hater. I'm sorry. I don't love Substack. And so when Beehive came out, they were also kind of early stage at the time. I was like, this is the perfect platform for me to get this off the ground. And so it really just started with like a couple hundred people. VCs would tell their friends about it. It was like a point of deal flow. And then I started angel investing. So I would have portfolio updates, and it really just kind of snowballed online as like a form of introductions and deal flow. And then founders would want to be on the list so they could get featured. And then on the other side of it, I was just hosting so many events in person. So again, if I was making the introductions over email, I was also hosting like a dinner for 10 people. Like I'm the type of person where if I just like get a reservation for 10 people, I'll just call enough people until I can fill the reservation like last minute. I won't give anyone like a chance to say no, and I'll be like, okay, you're gonna show up and we're gonna build community, talk to each other. So I think the Z List also in person, kind of in tandem with IRL and URL, the IRL side of it was like, let's make these introductions in person. Let's actually create valuable events that people want to go to. The event side of it came out of the frustration of me being on the Upper West Side, going deep into Brooklyn for like an event that was bad and having to go back up on the subway. So I was like, okay, I want to actually give people like what they're looking for, and not just like another, you feel awkward, you don't know how to interact with people, just create some structure.